All right, the sound of the vuvuzela means it is time for the Get More Sports World Tour Soccer Podcast. Hello, everybody. I'm EJ Gar, and boy, I've got a nice show in store for you today. We'll be covering some Champions League and some Europa League, and big competitions, of course, going on in club competition. And boy, a lot going on. Of course, yesterday we saw big 8 matches in the front match day one of front leg of each campaign here, and this is crazy. It's of course everyone saw Real Madrid and hat trick from Ronaldo, and we were talking. We have an Into the Cosmos podcast every week that you guys know about, and we talked to Carlos Mendez about the difference of Raul and Ronaldo's egos, and it's amazing how obviously Ronaldo, we all know, just surpassed Raul when it comes to Real Madrid all-time leading goal scorer. And you talk about the different attitude between the two players. Raul is such a different person than Ronaldo is. Obviously, Ronaldo is so full of himself, has probably the biggest ego I'm going to imagine in all of football. I mean, I can't envision any other player in not only Europe, South America. I mean, Neymar obviously has a pretty big ego as well, and that's what makes Messi so phenomenal and what separates him from the rest of the league. He doesn't act like, he just saved the world because he put a ball in the back of the net, like Ronaldo and his whole jumping up and landing on his side backwards with his arms like he's Superman, and then he wears his little Superman outfit. Dude, that's really ridiculous. But, it's what a massive difference that there is between Ronaldo and Raul. But, so obviously the hat trick for Ronaldo yesterday was pretty impressive, I guess, if you want to consider 2 penalty kicks and especially when you're playing a man down or a man up. Obviously, we saw in the 50th. What was it? The 50th minute, I think it was, when Stepanenko got sent off with the second yellow card somewhere. Of course, Ronaldo scored all 3 of his goals after the red card came, and it's not going to put too much stock in what he pulled off there, but. We're going to have a special guest here this week. We mentioned it last week that I'm hopefully going to have Phil Schoen come on the show from beIN Sports. And, of course, I'm in Las Vegas right now, and I want to talk about that a little bit because my wife and I went to the Mob Museum here in Fremont. And, wow, they have an amazing FIFA display there because obviously we all know about the scandal. We've discussed it here plenty of times over the course of I think 2 different shows we came on here and we talked about the scandal going on with FIFA and how the World Cup got designated. It's pretty cool to see the Mob Museum here in Las Vegas, and they have a great FIFA exhibit and to talk about all the stuff that went on, and it's still going on. Of course, that's still in progress, but let's see if we can get Phil in here now and see if that makes a difference. Hey, now that makes a difference, Phil. How you doing? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
Phil, thank you so much for joining us, man. You ready for some Champions League today? Could you believe Eden Hazard put that ball over? How far could you put a ball over the net? I think he thought he was playing actual American football when he took his penalty kick.
Just about almost catching up with that penalty kick from Neymar. Maybe one of these times they'll meet out in the asteroid belt.
And, Chelsea, of course, just scored a second ago, and Dynamo Kiev just scored against Porto, too, as you and I are coming on the air here at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast, and Zenit St. Petersburg, but they already scored against Valencia in Spain. Got a lot going on early. You got some early goals going on here, Phil.
Absolutely, and always a good way to start out. If you can get that going, it kind of makes the rest of the game a little bit easier. So, again, you take a look at some of the other teams that struggled to get on the board early, and if you kind of wait around till late, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo might steamroll you.
Yeah, and we saw 6 clubs yesterday get completely shut down, clean sheet, and maybe some expected that from Astana. Obviously, they're making their first appearance there. It's not exactly easy, but of course we saw another Atletico Madrid 2-0 score. I think Diego Simeone has invented how to win a football match 2-0, Phil.
He's very good, and he's also pretty good at the 1-0. He's basically one of those guys. Maybe not quite in the Jose Mourinho mold, but whatever it takes.
Yeah, certainly. What the surprise of the day has to be Manchester City and Juventus. I mean, we saw Manchester City get off to a scorching start, having given up a goal in league play, and then Juventus comes to England finds 2 goals and finds a way to get 3 points. How shocking was that? For me, that was personally the most shocking result of yesterday's outing.
It would be right up there. I think the fact that both of the Manchester City teams ended up struggling, United as well a little bit, and that's perhaps a little bit more to be understood, but the way that City had started out this season has been absolutely fantastic and better than I predicted. I'll hold my hand up, and it still could happen, but I had them finishing 4th in the Premier League this year. But the way that they have started, and perhaps even more the way that Chelsea has started this season, really gives City some reason to hope. So you kind of wonder, at this particular point, I wouldn't be too worried if I'm Pellegrini. I wouldn't be too worried if I am a Manchester City fan, because at this point that appears to be the blip. But we'll see. Let's just say that they're going to be keeping a close eye on their next match.
Yeah, that's for sure, Phil. And, how about Sevilla, Phil? How impressed were you? Obviously taking 2 straight Europa League titles. They earned their way into the group stage. And, man, the struggles of Gladbach, that is so concerning. They have gotten off to an absolute, oh, my God, you almost feel bad for the start that they've gotten off to in German Bundesliga so far. And then they head to the Champions League match and they get skunked again. No goals, not even close. I mean, they didn't even come close to that goal. That's another shocker for me. I'm surprised that German side really hasn't gotten off to a decent start. They had a terrible preseason as well, and it rolled right over into the regular season.
To a point, I would agree. I think yesterday maybe, again, if the 2 penalties aren't called, then it's a close game late. But it also goes to put a big feather in the cap of UEFA, who basically mandated that the champion of the Europa should be considered a champion for the Champions League. Even if nothing else really happens at this point out, Sevilla has proven that they belong, and we'll see how this plays out. But I agree with you in regards to the 3-0. There's still plenty of games to go in group stage play, but that's not the hole you want to start out. Obviously, Shakhtar as well, another team that has made its name known in recent years. And obviously a nation that has more important things to worry about than just how their soccer teams are doing. But that Real Madrid game is a big question. The one point I would say in Shakhtar's favor is the fact that when you're playing up against a Real Madrid, you kind of expect that. You funnel that into your predictions and your game plan. But I agree with you in regards to Gladbach. I think if they wanted to advance to the knockout stage, they're looking at that match in Sevilla as one that they probably could have won. And to see 3 on the scoreboard at the end of the game and a 3 in the table for Sevilla at the end of the game, that is a pretty big blow.
Yeah, certainly, Phil. And how about the Wolfsburg match, too? That Wolfsburg-Moscow match, it's amazing how Wolfsburg just seems to always put up 20 shots on goal per match. That's what they do. They've been doing it for years. We come to expect the fact that they're just going to keep pouring shots on goal. As to see a 1-0 result there is actually a little bit surprising. I mean, you'd think there'd be more goals in the back of that net, but I was pretty impressed with Wolfsburg and the composure to keep Moscow off the board.
I agree with you in regards to Wolfsburg, another team that's proving that, and maybe a tiny bit of a slow start in the Bundesliga compared to last year. But I think the real story there has probably been Borussia Dortmund and their revival, which I wouldn't say it was a dead lock, but you kind of had the feeling with the new management in charge, someone that was used to stepping in to the shoes of Jurgen Klopp before, that Thomas Tuchel would have them ready. Wolfsburg, perhaps a little bit of a slow start, but obviously getting it done in regards to Champions League play and proving that last year was not a fluke. Both teams really kind of close to the vest. Wolfsburg, the home team, obviously a little bit more the aggressor, and I think it was really nice to see Draxler get involved. There are a few questions as to how that can play out. Obviously, Bas Dost was the emerging star last year, but then you also have Schürrle and Kruse. So with Draxler stepping in, that really, really helps. And it'll be interesting to see how this group plays out and how the Bundesliga plays out. I don't think that anyone is going to catch Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga, regardless of the fact that Dortmund's in front at the moment. So I think in many ways Wolfsburg just is shooting for a top 3 or 4, and then maybe make their hay in Europe.
Yeah, and you speak about Group F too, with Bayern Munich and Arsenal, Olympiacos, and Zagreb. I mean, it's pretty tough. I don't think anybody out there is going to expect anything less than Bayern Munich to be walking to the knockout stage. There's no way Olympiacos or Zagreb are going to stand in their way. And that's a pretty easy cakewalk for Bayern Munich right there. Even with the injury to Robin, they've already started to deal with the injury bug over there. There's got to be a little bit of concern about that, because that's what obviously cost them last year. When they were in the semifinals, against Barcelona, they had no one on the field that was healthy. Obviously, they were without 4 or 5 major players down the stretch of last year's Champions League campaign, and now to lose Robin again for another month, there's a little bit of concern there.
There is, and I think a lot of people maybe have not heard of him yet, or maybe if they have, it's just been a little bit of news here or there. But I think that's one of the reasons they went out and got Kingsley Coman. Obviously, it would have been great to go out and get at Eden Hazard, but that's not going to happen. So you're also taking a look at the players who have proven ability. How many of them would want to basically sit behind Arjen Robben or Ribéry, et cetera, and wait till they got hurt? You knew it was going to happen, but if you're anywhere near your prime and talented, you want to be out there playing every week. So I think what they did, though, was to go out and get a young, promising player through PSG who was outstanding coming up, played very well for Juventus when he had his opportunities, and I think is a very, very much so a Pep Guardiola type player. So even if they do get the injury bug, I think they have perhaps a little bit more depth this year, but this is about as easy a dream group as they could have. Even with Arsenal in that group, you kind of got to figure, and as an Arsenal fan I say this, you just try not to lose too bad in the 2 games against Bayern, and you should move on. I think Olympiacos, maybe even more than Dinamo, is a team that maybe could pinch a surprise here or there. If they can just keep you off the board, grab a point, and make you drop 2. But I think over the long haul of the 6 games, it's pretty clear who's going to be 1, who's going to be 2.
Yeah. Do you think, Zagreb is up 1-0 on Arsenal as you and I are speaking here about a half hour into the match? And a little surprising there to see Zagreb come out with a 1-0 lead early. So you're an Arsenal fan. Is that your team, Phil?
Yes, it is. And by the way, Dinamo did not score. Arsenal just decided to give them one.
Okay.
Oxlade-Chamberlain with an own goal. But you know what? They'll take it. We'll see. Again, I grew up an Arsenal fan from the 1970s in the days of Charlie George and when O'Leary was still playing, and have loved it all the way in all of its frustrating brilliance.
I'm a Roma fan, man, so I kind of feel all that same exact thing with you, man. I mean, it just,
you know what though? I love this team that we have. In last the game against Stoke was probably the best I've seen Arsenal play in years. However, I kind of have a feeling you're Roma. As things progress this season and into the James Pallotta reign, bar Serie A coming up with its usual way to screw up things, if he can kind of avoid all of those bear traps, I think it's going to be a very good next 5 to 10 years for Roma, especially once that new stadium opens up. I think that Juventus is going to have a true rival, and I think that Roma will be ready to burst back on the European stage.
I don't know. I don't know. Francesco Totti has been actually driving me crazy for the last couple of years, Phil. And then he plays in the exhibition matches before the regular season starts, and then the regular season starts and they sit him for the first 2 matches, the road game, the home game, and he didn't even get 1 minute of time. So he's obviously healthy. He's obviously not injured. Rudy Garcia decides not to put him on the pitch. Whose choice is that? Do you think that's coming from Rudy, or do you think that's Francesco Totti saying, I'm not ready? And he played in the 6-4 game right before the regular season, and he came off. He was healthy as hell. So why sit him? I was totally befuddled how number 10 was not on the field to start the season. Why?
Well, in all honesty, I think it comes down to the realism that these games don't really matter. Obviously, they don't want to have as many draws as they did last season. The fact that they already had one and opened up with one against Verona was maybe a reason to panic a bit. But they don't need, and I know this is blasphemy, but they don't need Francesco Totti at the moment. There are going to be some games where maybe against Juventus later in the season, maybe against an Inter Milan, which could have Champions League significance, or later on in Europe this season, where they might need to get Totti. But I think they're going to spot start him. I think they're going to maybe utilize him as a super sub in a lot of those mid-level games, because in all honesty, you go up against a team that loves to run, and in many ways it's going to be playing like you're 11 on 10, even more than when he was at his prime. I mean, he was never one to shy away, but he wasn't really one to go chase down either. I think that what they have done, holding on to Gervinho, and for all of the flaws, he does give you a guy that can break down a defense.
Yeah.
Bringing in guys like Dzeko, Iturbe, I really like the way Iago Falque is fitting into this team. The metamorphosis of Florenzi into a pretty good right back, plus also the fact that they go out and I think a young Rudiger grabbing Digne is a rather inspired pick. You take a look at this team, and Szczesny as well, even just between the pipes. This is a team that, at least on paper, is a top 3 or 4 team in Italy. And I think on the field under Garcia could be even better. I think Dzeko is really the key. In many ways, it's the guy that they've been looking at, even going back to the Spalletti era, where they kind of progressed with that 4-6-0 formation. Now they actually do have a guy that can lead the attack and be a good target man. I think it's going to be really good times in the near future for Roma. Again, they have to try and find a way to turn those draws from last year into victories this year more often than not. And I think that they will be able to find that odd goal.
Yeah, let's stay in Serie A for a second, Phil, because how impressed have you been with Chievo to take out Lazio in that fashion? And then, you know what, they deserve better than that Juventus 1-1 result. They should have had that win. And, of course, you knew Juventus was going to get that call, that found a way to get them that goal. That's been happening for 4 seasons. I mean, since they got back up.
Some would say 40 seasons.
Yeah, but obviously since they came up from Serie B when they got sent down, they seem to always get those calls. You think Inter and Chievo can actually stay on top of this board? I mean, obviously we're only 3 fixtures into the campaign, but you know. You
got to remember, even with that break, Juventus only climbs up to 16th in the table. It is really topsy-turvy. Again, if you would have said a few weeks back that for this third round match you'd be basically looking at a team that was topping the table against a team that was dead last, you would have had the teams reversed. And I have a feeling that Chievo at the end of the season is going to be a lot closer to the relegation zone. Juventus is probably going to be at the top of the table. But it just gives you an idea, something that we talked about in the past, something that I've talked about for the last 3 or 4 years, that perhaps due to economic necessity, Serie A has restructured its foundation. And I think as more and more teams, Juventus was the first, Roma's going to try and get there, Udinese is doing it themselves, and Milan now making noise. When they get their own stadiums, control more of the revenue stream to basically be a solid business, you already know they're going to invest in that business from a playing perspective. But in the past, it's kind of been wasteful, wanton, almost like spending it on your toys rather than spending it on your team. And I think that's probably changed just a little bit in recent years. And I think we're probably not that far away from seeing Italy grab a top 3 spot and grab that 4th Champions League berth. The other irony would be as if that comes at the expense of the Premier League, which could happen within the next year. in large part because, as we are taking a look at tomorrow, maybe not as much as Spain, but Italy is starting to pay a lot closer attention to the Europa League, and in many ways in England, especially with League Cup, FA Cup, that's a distraction. And that's really what cost Italy a decade ago when Germany jumped over them. And I think England is in danger of falling into that very same trap. So it'll be easy to see. It'll be interesting to see how some of these teams do. I was really impressed, like I said. You mentioned Roma, Napoli even to a point, Fiorentina another one. I was looking at some of these other teams like Inter Milan really jumping forward, Milan even making some big moves in the off-season. Juventus as well, partly due to necessity because of the players that left. But you take a look at the Roma, the Napoli, and Fiorentina, but really even Lazio, who I had the chance to cover this past week. I'm not sure about for the championship. Again, I think Juve, despite their slow start, a runaway leader at the end. But for that third and fourth spot, that Champions League to Europa, and even Europa to being out of Europe altogether, I think this is going to be a season to remember. I wouldn't be surprised to see, say, with 2-3 rounds left to go, you still maybe have 8 or 9 teams that are still fighting it out for Europe.
Were you surprised that AC Milan held on to Inzaghi as long as they did? I mean, if they're going to let him go at the end of the year anyway, why didn't they make this move when they were still in contention? I mean, with 10 matches left in last year, they could have made a run to the Europa League at the very worst and been in some kind of European club competition of some sort. And yet they still hung on to Inzaghi, and then they end up letting him go anyway. I thought that move should have been made long before it happened. He's not a head coach. He's a former player. I disagree with that entire thing. I thought Inzaghi should have been out of there a lot sooner than he did. And like I said, if they're going to let him go anyway, why did you hang on to him late last year? I thought that was a terrible move.
Well, you have to remember Milan does not like to fire the coaches in the middle of the season. And the fact that they had hung Clarence Seedorf out to dry a little bit, and that this was the guy that got the favor of the brain trust. I don't think they really wanted to admit they made a mistake. I think that they probably would have been a little bit better off if they would have stuck with Seedorf, although from what I've read, there were a few issues in the dressing room. Seedorf not one to back down. And I think in some ways you could say the same even about Inzaghi. In many ways, they're still too much the player and not enough the manager. I think there are not many people out there who can make that smooth transition like Carlo Ancelotti did from being a world-class player to a world-class manager. He did it practically seamlessly and continues to, regardless of what Florentino Perez says. But in regards to Inzaghi and Seedorf, I'd like to see them stick around. Both of them have so much to offer, but they're not there yet. I think, again, you take a look at some of the problems that Milan has had in the recent past, had to do with recklessness, sloppy play, so that even in games where they had a chance, something they would do would cost them. And it goes back to the irony of basically Mihailovic saying, I'm trying to remember, he would rather, I guess it would be the equivalent to paraphrase a bit, rather be on food stamps than coaching Milan. But obviously, I think they found a way to sneak the caviar on. I think he's a good pick. There's going to be some transitions here. There's going to be a little bit of headbutting. It hasn't been a very smooth start, but I think we've seen flashes. And I would not be surprised to see Milan. I don't think they're going to be a top 3 team, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the top 6.
Yeah, they're still dealing with a few injuries, too. They're keeping some couple players out of there, too. But, I definitely want to get your opinion on some Europa League before I let you go, Phil, because, there's some interesting groups in Europa League, and we've seen this before with all these high-scoring games. I don't know if you remember about 3 years – well, of course you remember, about 3 years ago when every game seemed to be like 6-5. I mean, it was just so many goals in Europa League, and it seems like through qualifying to get to group stages this year, there have been an amazing amount of goals being scored. And this Group J, Group J and Group K are both kind of interesting for me, Phil. Tottenham, Anderlecht, and Monaco in the same group in Group J. I just wonder if Monaco is going to be motivated to actually really care about being in Europa League. We see this with Italian clubs a lot. What's the motivation? Why would we care? But still, to me, Group J seems pretty interesting with Tottenham, Anderlecht, and Monaco. All that's an interesting group, though.
It is, and I think what you talked about is the big reason why UEFA decided to give that Champions League berth to the winner. I think we saw that intensity last season. I think in many ways, even though you do have that ultimate prize to aim for, there is less pressure than when you're fighting it out for the big cup. In the big cup, I think you're more afraid of losing. When you're talking about Europa, I think teams perhaps maybe take a little bit more of a risk when it comes to try and win it. And I think that's been true in the recent past. Even going back, I remember a decade ago when Zenit St. Petersburg was bursting onto the scene. There were some really good games in Europa, but still you didn't quite get the big boys to pay attention. I think that changed with Spain. Obviously, Sevilla, with its success, kind of rattled the doors a little bit, and now they've been rewarded that with yet another Europa crown. I think Germany, a lot of those teams will battle regardless, but now that Italy has and France has, and now that England has too, it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. And I think maybe just the fact that the ping pong balls bounced a little bit differently, or the fact that in Europa you don't really have the powerhouse groups. I mean, you don't have Real Madrid forced into the second pot. You're basically looking at teams that are a lot more level. So even something like Group A, where you have Ajax, Celta, Fenerbahce, and Molde, any of those teams could really move on. And I think you look at Group B, Bordeaux, Liverpool, and Rubin Kazan. I think that they all have a chance to be a top two team. But then, as you point out, you get down to Group J, and Karabakh is basically just around for the experience and maybe the frequent flyer miles. But Anderlecht and Spurs, I think, are probably more consistent. But Monaco has the ability to do something special. The difference is, though, from this Monaco side, is over the last 2 years they've shed some expensive talent and taken a few risks last year that paid off. But you wonder whether they can get back to the well this time around. So I agree with you. I think a lot of stuff could happen there before things are over. Another one that I would look at is Group L.
Me too. Yeah. I was just going to say
I think all four of those teams are worthy of getting to the knockout stage. I know Partizan in a little bit of a difficult situation. Augsburg, maybe a bit of the bloom off the rose. But AZ is a solid side, and my team, my dark horse team in Spain, I see them sneaking into 5th or 6th this year is Athletic. And I think we saw how good they can be in the Super Cup. And I think they can still get even better, especially when Iñaki Williams gets back healthy and going full speed. And just picking up Raul Garcia, good, solid journeyman who can play in about 6-7 different positions. I kind of have a feeling that Valverde, he was kind of someone was talking about how easy Europa is. And he said, it's a very easy competition that we have never won. So I think in some ways it's giving you an idea that they know it won't be easy, and they are setting their focus on it. In many ways, until you get the big clubs versus the big clubs, and we're going to be covering this, by the way, north of the border. beIN Sports in Canada has both Champions League and Europa, so we're getting a chance to do a little bit of that this week. It'll be fun.
Nice.
I always like Europa better than Champions League in most of the group stage games, because I think it's so much of the group stage in Champions League is chess, it's tactics. How do you line the pieces up for the last round or two to mean something for you? Where in Europa, I sense it tends to be a fun game regardless of who the teams are and at what stage of the group they are. So if you have, I guess, put your glasses on or your blinders on and say that it's not worthy of you, it's below you, give it a chance sometimes. I mean, I love this sport. And I can respect a World Cup, a Copa Libertadores, a Champions League, etc. But I enjoy watching it even down to like my kids' games in under 11 and under 12. There's something about this sport, and there is a lot to be said for some of the games that you're going to see tomorrow in Europa play.
Yeah, and let's not leave out Group G, Phil. Dnipro, Lazio, Saint Etienne, and Rosenborg. I mean, that's a pretty nice group, Phil. I mean,
absolutely, and Saint Etienne, I think a team that's tempted in recent years, EJ, just kind of on the fringe of those Champions League spots in France.
Yep.
But I think that they've gotten a lot better. The acquisition of Vadbeck just before the deadline from PSG on loan is a great pickup. This is a guy that's about ready to burst. As I mentioned, Lazio, they get Mauri back, who's an inspirational leader. Everyone that plays Lazio hates him, but he is an icon for the club, and they always seem to play better when he's out there. And again, you take a look. If you have a chance to look back at the Lazio game midweek, I would be really concerned if I'm playing them anytime soon. Just the way the pieces of the puzzle are kind of fitting together, they could be one of those teams that makes a really big run. And I know 2-0 over Udinese doesn't really sound like much, but it was a match in which they were rarely put on the back foot. It kind of helped, obviously, that Di Natale was on the bench and only came in for the last few minutes. But you just take a look at, for example, the kid, I don't know if you remember, that came over from Barcelona, one of the pride in La Masia, who was a little bit too much of a practical joker at times and disrupted things according to the Barcelona way. So they loaned him out to Cornellà. And then I'm trying to remember, I think they loaned him to Lazio, but somewhere along the way in the early going, Barcelona started to realize that this kid was going to be good, and they tried to get him back, and he basically said, nope, thanks, but no thanks. He could be the revelation of the season because he can play anywhere on the front line, and as he matures and builds beyond his 20-year-old frame, I think he'll be even more dangerous as a central striker. But we even saw him creating a lot on the flanks when they brought Matri in. And Matri already in, about 25 minutes of play for Lazio has scored more goals than he has for the team that actually holds his pass in Milan. And he's been with Milan off and on for, 6 years? And in 25 minutes, he's already doubled his Milan haul.
And it's amazing, man. And the one problem I have with Lazio is they are Jekyll and Hyde, man. You cannot beat them in Rome, and they cannot win when they leave Rome. That's a concern for me, man. And to open up match day one in Dnipro, that's a little bit of concern. Obviously, the line setters are saying Lazio has no chance of winning this game. They're like plus 200. They're not giving them a chance, and that's my concern with Lazio. They cannot win away from Rome, Phil. They just can't.
In the past, I think you might be right. I think they've made some smart pickups, though. Speaking of AZ, the ex-AZ defender Wesley Hutt, still 20, 21, I think, but looked very, very good. I think with Felipe Anderson, I have a feeling Lulic is probably going to be forced to the bench. They have Konko, who's also good, especially in reserve. I think Basta has really grabbed that spot on the right himself. I kind of have a feeling, and also even credit to Pioli, who is a no-nonsense boss. I kind of have a feeling he's going to get his team ready. Now, you might be right. I mean, maybe this is just asking a little bit too much too soon, but before the group stage is over, don't be surprised if they have a couple of W's away from Rome.
Yeah, they might. We'll see. But all right, Phil, we're out of time here. Man, I can't even thank you enough for coming on the show. It's like your third appearance here, Phil. I love when you come on the show. Every time you come on, I just say, oh, great. I love it, man. I love how you call your games. I love to, man, Phil, I think you're impressive, man, and I really love having you on the show.
EJ, I am blessed. As I said, I mean, I love soccer. I love this sport, and I love the people I get a chance to work with. There are a lot of other people, I'm sure, who would love to be doing what I'm doing, and I'm just very, very grateful that I get the opportunity and try and do my best every time out. But I think one thing you learn in this game is you're only as good as the game. You can't really dress up a dead pig too much, but at the same point, I guess you can kind of make it entertaining. All you have to do is ask a Cuban around Christmas what they can do with a pig. So it should be fun for this season. As I said, getting a chance to be part of some of the Champions League and Europa stuff for our fans across the border, and then now with La Liga locked up for 5 years and Serie A and Liga as well, and even just getting ready for CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. We just got through some African World Cup qualifying, which was amazing. So
nice.
it never stops. It's 12 months a year, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, that's the best thing about this sport is that you're looking for a game, you'll find it. I mean, it's on somewhere.
Absolutely.
All right, Phil, again, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. I'd imagine we will.
Look forward to it. Have fun.
All right, Phil. Take care, man. So cool. It's so cool. I love having Phil Schoen on the show. Like I said, it's his third appearance here on the Get More Sports World Tour. We have fun. He knows his stuff, obviously, and it's cool to talk about Champions League, Europa League, and all the other leagues that are going on at the time. And like you said, there is no break. It's just some leagues may come to an end, but over that 2-month span when the leagues are done, we're talking about international stuff, Copa all over. All right, let's get everybody out of here again. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to the Get More Sports World Tour Soccer podcast here at GetMoreSports.com. And thanks again to Be In Sports and Phil Schoen for coming by and hanging out with us. And, of course, we'll leave you with the sound of the Vuvuzela.